In this video, we look back at 15 years of VGMaps. Hey everyone, John here. Now that I've been YouTubing for about a year, it's actually kind of a surprise that I haven't spoken much about the other thing that I do on the internet, and that is maintaining VGMaps.com, the video game atlas. If you're not aware, VGMaps.com is a collection of nearly 40,000 video game maps, many of which are constructed with screenshots. As of May of this year, 2017, VGMaps.com has been up for 15 years. 15 years. And yes, it's already been a few months since then, but better late than never. So let's now take a look at the 15 best map sets on the site. By best, I can mean any of a number of things. The biggest, the best looking, or somehow significant in VGMaps.com's history. It will be hard to pick with over 2,000 games, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. Just a heads up, since I'll be talking about games that are mapped mostly in their entirety, there will be spoilers if for some reason you haven't played these games. While this list is in no particular order, it would be fitting to mention this game first. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Super NES. Maps by JonLeung. That's me. For the third Zelda console game, A Link to the Past, Iron Knuckle mapped the dungeons and Alex Foster mapped the Dark World. But before they could contribute them, I did the Light World before VGMaps.com even existed. While these maps aren't technically that impressive, it was the stitching together of some screenshots from this game on a lazy day that led to my first map, the Lost Woods. Then I moved on to other areas, and before long the whole Light World was assembled. I consider this the first map of VGMaps.com, even though it's kind of the other way around, that VGMaps.com was born from the Lost Woods. I love this map so much, I even had it printed and framed. Now because each major area fits neatly into a square, these locations are available as individual maps as well, because I think they make great desktop wallpaper, thus establishing how I've always felt that some maps can be admired as art, not just for gameplay strategy. A Link to the Past is notable for being the first video game to get an entirely dedicated player's guide from Nintendo Power, and this game is also probably my favorite adventure game, though definitely my favorite Zelda game. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, Nintendo 64, Peardian. Now I'm sure that many of you would disagree, and that you would say it's actually The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time that is the best Zelda game, and even the best video game of all time. Period. This iconic game, which was the first to get a perfect 40 out of 40 score from Famitsu magazine, I would certainly agree is definitely one of those must-play games that every gamer should play before they die. But that's not necessarily why I ranked this among the best maps on VGMaps.com. I mean, look at these! These are maps for a Nintendo 64 game. That is, this is a 5th generation console game that is rendered in polygons and 3-dimensional space. Regular mapper Peardian, known for mapping a number of Mario games, has also tackled the technical issues of mapping a game that can't simply be put together by screenshots, and has even taught these N64 mapping techniques in the VGMaps.com forums. And as these maps are dependent on perspective, he's mapped these from above and also from the side. This is next level stuff compared to mapping any 2D tile-based game. Even the infamous water temple is fully on display here, and the side view map for that alone is responsible for most of VGMaps.com's mentions on Reddit. Yes, we have almost 40,000 maps, and yet this is the one map that so many people need. Peardian has started work on the sequel, Majora's Mask, and Peardian's other projects on the Nintendo 64 include Paper Mario and Super Smash Bros. But my favorite map set from him has got to be Ocarina of Time. Well deserving of being the 100th game honored for the Maps of the Month feature on VGMaps. Final Fantasy VII, PlayStation, FlyingArmor. Now if you're not in the camp that believes Ocarina of Time is the best game ever, you might instead be among the many who say that Final Fantasy VII is the best game. Guess what? VGMaps.com has got you covered here too, thanks to veteran RPG mapper FlyingArmor. Because the game is mostly made up of pre-rendered areas, how you see it here is exactly as it appears in-game. We've come to expect that the best maps of RPGs have items, save points, and exits indicated. And this is no exception. But perhaps more appreciated here now that RPGs don't have to be grids of tiles, and hence things can now be hidden behind other things based on perspective, or simply easier to miss because there's a lot more detail and stuff going on. From the #1 reactor to deep inside the planet, this popular Final Fantasy game is entirely mapped, except for the 3-dimensional overworld. But FlyingArmor says a map for it is coming, hopefully in time for the Final Fantasy VII Remake, but then again, at the rate Square Enix is going, who knows when that will be out. Chrono Trigger, Super NES, by Bruns. While we're talking about Square Enix, let's just recognize another great JRPG, Chrono Trigger. Rick Bruns from NESMaps.com and SNESMaps.com also contributes to VGMaps.com, and we're glad that he does. Many games have the idea of two worlds that mirror each other, like in The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, Castlevania: Harmony of Dissonance, and the Silent Hill games. But Chrono Trigger has 7 time periods, with no less than 5 whole worlds. It's always fun to compare the worlds when there are multiple ones, but the 5 worlds, well, technically one world but at 5 different eras, is especially cool. You can see how the world changes over time, and finding these differences might help you solve some of the puzzles in this epic quest. Castlevania, Symphony of the Night, PlayStation, Revned, and others. Speaking of games with multiple areas that correspond to each other, the incredible Castlevania Symphony of the Night for the original PlayStation is the pinnacle of the series. In the generation when bringing game series into 3 dimensions was all the rage, Konami put out one more 2D adventure, but this one is less like previous Castlevania games and more like Super Metroid. And this is by no means a bad thing. But the game is huge, and mapping Dracula's castle would be a massive undertaking. So veteran mapper Revned planned this all out and created a team for this group project, the second time a group project was organized in the forums. It took a while, but with help from Edsword, mephea, TerraEsperZ, wileee, and Zeric, Revned was able to get the castle complete, overcoming the technical challenges like having to contend with multiple graphical layers including transparencies. And what we end up with is an image that is 188 megapixels, or 17.5 megabytes, which is huge! But that's not all. Now, and here's a spoiler warning, if you reach the top of the tower and do the correct thing, then instead of the game ending there, an upside down castle descends from the clouds above, and now the fairly lengthy game is now twice as big. Given the difficulty of mapping the first castle, it wasn't too surprising, though perhaps disappointing, when it initially seemed like the second castle might not ever be mapped. But then a few years later, Revned surprised everyone by having mapped the entire second castle all by himself. And then he also mapped the areas exclusive to the Japanese Sega Saturn version. You want a ginormous map? The single image of the 2 castles together is a whopping 487 megapixels and over 36 megabytes that, depending on your computer and browser, you might have difficulty viewing this. But impressive as all this gothic architecture is, even the massiveness of Castlevania's Symphony of the Night's 2 castles doesn't make it the largest thing on VGMaps.com. Ultima 7, The Black Gate, and Ultima 7 Part 2, Serpent Isle. PC, Zerker. Ultima 7, The Black Gate for the PC takes place in the land of Britannia yet again, but this time the massive square overworld has each side being over 24,500 pixels, meaning a total area of nearly 604 megapixels. PC game mapper Zerker has provided 2 versions of this world map, including one showing the interior areas. Its sequel, Ultima 7 Part 2 Serpent Isle, has a map that has the same image area, also in 2 versions. These 4 maps range from 59.9 to 89 megabytes. While Castlevania Symphony of the Night is more interesting visually, if you want to talk strictly about size, Ultima 7 sure has it beat. At least an image area. Rise of the Triad. PC, Zerker. Now if you want to talk about file size, Zerker has some records here too, as he has also mapped the 1995 PC shooter game, Rise of the Triad. The 176 maps here total 2.35 gigabytes, which is currently about a sixth of all of VGMaps.com itself. That size is ludicrous. As with all maps submitted to VGMaps, I run them through PingGauntlet to reduce the file size, but it took my computer over 2 weeks straight to run through all these maps. But okay, enough about size. There are more ways to judge these maps, besides how much space they take up. Super Mario Bros. 3, NES. KingKuros, Zeric, JonLeung, Revned, Maxx, and mephea. But we can talk about big in another sense. Super Mario Bros. 3 was one of the biggest games of its time, if not the biggest. Everyone heard of this game, and everyone had to play it. A couple of years into running VGMaps.com, I was surprised that there still wasn't a map set for Super Mario Bros. 3, so I initiated the first VGMaps group project to get it done. In retrospect, the game isn't as huge as originally expected, and considering the scope of other games that have been mapped by a single person, the 6-person Super Mario Bros. 3 mapping team of myself, KingKuros, Zeric, Revned, Maxx, and mephea might have been overkill. Still, it didn't take long, and we managed to coordinate color palettes and design choices and proved it was possible to map as a group. The idea to have a background color per world was inspired by Volume 13 of Nintendo Power, also the first Nintendo Power strategy guide. Super Metroid, Super NES, Rick Bruns. On the topic of games that begin with Super M that are the third part of a Nintendo series, here's Super Metroid. Other than Google, who can say they've mapped a whole planet? Rick can say he has, as he's tackled all of Planet Zebes. And just like with The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and Castlevania Symphony of the Night, the individual areas are viewable separately if you can't handle the awesomeness of all of this in a single image. And Rick did a great job in indicating all of the items, the hidden passageways, and all the different kinds of destructible blocks. A high-quality game mapped to the highest standards. And this game is just so vibrant with its incredible graphics. Battletoads, NES, TerraEsperZ. On the topic of games with incredibly detailed and colorful graphics despite its subterranean areas, here's Battletoads, mapped by TerraEsperZ. It's also known for being so difficult that not many people legitimately get through the Turbo Tunnel, which is only the 3rd level. But if you've seen the video on the Atlas Vids YouTube channel by Andy Dick, which used TerraEsperZ's map to expand the viewing area, it looks laughably easy as there's tons more time to react to the oncoming obstacles. But getting to see all of this challenging game is not the only reason Battletoads is among my top picks. TerraEsperZ has also made an animated map for the second last level, the Revolution, that appears to spin and shows off all sides of the stage that actually rotates like this in-game. While not the only animated map on VGMaps.com, it's certainly the most impressive in my opinion, and shows a unique feature that digital maps have over printed maps. Mega Man series, NES to Wii, Revned, Gemini Man, Zeric, and X-God. As mentioned, Nintendo Power influenced much of my love of screenshot maps. My first actually subscribed issue was Volume 20 from January 1991, featuring Mega Man 3 on the cover. And I suppose that could be why Revned's Mega Man 3 maps were the first Maps of the Month honoree in May 2004. Revned subsequently did, and also redid, all 6 NES Mega Man games. Then Gemini Man, the mapper, not the Robot Master, did the Super NES games, 7 and the Japanese version of Mega Man in base. Zeric tackled the PlayStation version of Mega Man 8, and X-God did the exclusive areas in the Sega Saturn version. Since 9 and 10 reverted back to NES style, it's no surprise that Revned handled those ones as well. But what is interesting is that in September 2008, a few days before Mega Man 9 was released, Tengu Man, the mapper, not the Robot Master, reconstructed Concrete Man's and Tornado Man stages. And how it was done was he looked at pre-release screenshots and E3 gameplay videos and managed to rebuild it that way. Considering the method used, that's pretty impressive. In the end, this series is beloved by many, so I could have put this on my list just because. But there's more to this. Long before I attempted to map The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, I did a sort of prototype screenshot map with Bomb Man stage from the first Mega Man game. I was using PaintShop Pro 3 and lacking experience with handling graphics, and not yet understanding about limited palettes, so when the pixels changed color when I pasted them, I couldn't figure out why this was happening, and gave up on it. Thankfully, the dream didn't die, and the whole main series was mapped, and much of several of the spin-off games and spin-off series as well. And if you're a Mega Man fan, you've probably already seen my other video about it.
Okay, we have Scissors Man.
Scissor Man.
Scissor Man?
Clock Tower. Super NES. TerraEsperZ. Speaking of Scissor Man, he's a constant threat in the game Clock Tower for the Super NES, or more accurately, the Super Famicom. An interesting thing is, despite running VGMaps.com, I haven't really come to the site for help in playing a video game. The only time I recall for sure that I have was on Halloween 2013. Wanting to play a scary game, but only having one night to play it, I loaded up Clock Tower, and with TerraEsperZ's map, I managed to evade the Scissor Man and get ending S, which is the best ending, on my first try. And that's what video game maps are originally for, to help you through a game. So for that, this map of Clock Tower makes it onto my list. Maniac Mansion, NES, JonLeung. The Barrows Mansion of Clock Tower isn't the only creepy mansion on this list. We also have the Edison Mansion. I love point-and-click computer games, yet strangely, my favorite version of LucasArts' classic game Maniac Mansion, a pioneer in this genre, is actually on the NES, despite the lack of a mouse. I mapped this game, and Ron Gilbert himself, the writer, director, programmer, and artist of Maniac Mansion, posted a link to my map on his Grump Gamer blog back in 2004, which was soon picked up by boingboing.net, and then a massive spike in hits. Since VGMaps.com was still only a couple years old, such a boost was incredibly encouraging, and VGMaps.com would make other appearances in media as well. A Boy and His Blob, Trouble on Blobolonia, NES, JJ Maxx. JJ Maxx's map of the Earth, or the Night World, of A Boy and His Blob on the NES made an appearance on episode 69 of G4TV's Attack of the Show back in 2005, where host Kevin Pereira talks about VGMaps.com early in the episode and sets it as the wallpaper, replacing an image of Rosie O'Donnell.
All right, let's get to the meat and potatoes here. We're going to start off with an old website, but it's a great one, and we need it today, which is why we're showing it. VGMaps.com. It's a collection of world maps from video games.
Yeah.
And not just like NES games, but pretty much any platform, any game, any system. We can look at maps of the month. You know, and there, you know, there's sprites out of Metroid, sprites out of, you know, Mario World. The NES section is great. Let me see here. Let me pull it up. Let's go NES. Boy and his Blob. I'm gonna nominate that as our new background, if that's okay. Nothing against Rosie.
Come on, man.
But I think it's time to replace it. I'm sorry. So we're gonna set that as our wallpaper, and there you go. You could literally get you know, images from all your favorite games. Boy and his Blob. So if you want to suggest a better game or a better sprite, you can see it's the entire map. Like, it's the whole thing. It's all there. One giant image.
But Rosie's gone now, man, and now I'm sad. I'm crying on the inside.
That's okay. You feel free to cry over it. We're not putting her back.
For getting VGMaps.com televised, a boy and his blob makes the list. Quo Vadis, Commodore 64, KingKuros. KingKuros' map of the Commodore 64 game, Quo Vadis, could help you navigate this immense dungeon. In a few places are some clues, and the first person to solve this riddle and mailed in their answer could have won a prize, a scepter worth 10,000 to 35,000 pounds, depending on who you ask. Supposedly, the prize was never claimed. You can read more about it in Retro Gamers issue 81, where this was the first time that I know of where a map seen in VGMaps.com came out in print. For getting VGMaps.com published, Quo Vadis makes the list. And there you have it, my favorite 15 map sets on VGMaps.com, the video game atlas. Check out these maps and close to 40,000 others from over 2,000 games on VGMaps.com. Do you agree with this list? What are your favorite maps? Comment below. And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Thanks for watching. See ya.